Good evening, and welcome back to SleepWise. If you enjoy these gentle stories, you can follow and subscribe for free on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. And if SleepWise has helped you unwind, sharing it with a friend is one of the quietest ways to keep it growing. Tonight, we settle into a long view. Not the rush of a single lifetime, but the slow, patient span of thousands of generations. Imagine the world before names and nations, before calendars and clocks. A world of wind through grass, distant thunder, the simple logic of hunger and shelter. In that wide darkness, you are not yet you, and humanity is not yet a headline. It is simply a small branch on a very large tree. The book we're drifting through is Sapiens, a sweeping story of how Homo sapiens, one species among many, came to shape forests, oceans, and even the air itself. For most of our history, humans lived as foragers, moving with seasons, reading the land like a soft, familiar language. We were not alone. Other human species once walked the same earth. Neanderthals in cold valleys, Denisovans in mountain shadows, and others whose names we may never fully know. So how did one branch remain? Sapiens suggests that our most unusual tool was not claw or fang, but imagination, our ability to share stories that bind strangers together. Around 70,000 years ago, something shifted in the mind. Richer language, flexible cooperation, and the talent for believing in things you cannot touch. Spirits, clans, laws, money, nations. These shared fictions, gentle as whispers and strong as rope, let small bands become large societies. You can feel it even now in ordinary life. A passport, a wedding ring, a banknote, a promise on a screen. They work because many minds agree to treat them as real. The agreement itself becomes a kind of invisible architecture, stronger than stone in some places, softer than sand in others. And once humans learned to live inside shared stories, we began to build worlds that could outlast any single storyteller. As you listen, let the scale soothe you. Your breath is close, warm, immediate. While human history is vast, like a night sky that keeps its calm no matter what happens below. We'll walk through revolutions that changed everything. How farming rearranged daily life, how wheat and goats quietly pulled us into fields and fences, how empires and religions stitched order across distance, and how science learned to begin with a simple phrase, "We don't know yet." For now, just let the world slow. Let your thoughts loosen their grip. Tonight, we drift back to the first fires, the first stories, and the quiet beginnings of the modern mind. And if sleep arrives early, that's perfect. These ideas don't need to be held tightly. Let them pass like lantern light through a tent, a soft glow, then darkness again. In those early tens of thousands of years, a human day was made of small, honest tasks. Feet on cool ground at dawn, fingers testing a berry's softness, ears tuned for birds that scatter when something larger moves nearby. In a foraging life, knowledge lived in the body. which trees speak in spring, which clouds mean rain, where the water hides when the land looks dry. For a long time, Homo sapiens was not the ruler of anything. We were a mid-sized animal, clever but fragile, surrounded by lions, hyenas, and bears that had no reason to fear us. Our advantage was not strength, it was coordination, the ability to think together, to move together, to become, for a few hours, a single attentive creature. Sapiens describes a quiet hinge. When language became flexible enough, humans could trade more than warnings and directions. We could trade meaning. Many animals can signal danger. One call for eagle, another for snake. But humans learned to speak about things that were not present, not visible, sometimes not even real. There is a spirit by that river. Our clan comes from that star. Tomorrow we will meet the other band and share meat. Once you can describe an imagined thing, you can invite someone else into it. And once many people share the same imagined thing, they can act together without knowing each other well. A story becomes a bridge. A symbol becomes a shortcut to trust. A name for the group becomes a soft boundary around us, a boundary that can travel across valleys and seasons. The book also lingers on something ordinary but powerful: gossip. Not the cruel kind, but the social remembering that lets a band keep balance. Who shares, who takes, who comforts, who lies. In small groups, that information is safety. It helps you decide where to sleep, who to follow, who to forgive. It is a kind of invisible infrastructure, older than roads. So tonight, let your mind picture a circle of firelight, faces half lit, smoke rising into cold air, a rhythm of voices that settles the nervous system. One person points toward the dark and says, "Listen." Another answers, "We are safe." The world outside is the same. Wind, trees, distant predators, but the shared story changes how it feels to be in it. And slowly, that feeling becomes power. Archaeologists can't replay that ancient shift like a film, but they can infer its traces, bursts of art, tools traded across distance, beads and pigments that suggest identity and ritual. A mind that decorates is a mind that can imagine how it looks to someone else. A mind that paints an animal on stone is also a mind that can plan, persuade, and dream. If your thoughts are busy tonight, let them become smaller. Let them become the crackle of twigs, the slow turning of a face toward warmth. The earliest human technology, in a way, was reassurance. One nervous system calming another, and in that calm, the tribe survives. As sapiens spread, they did not travel alone. They carried invisible companions, habits, myths, and ways of seeing. When humans arrived in new lands, Australia, the Americas, islands scattered across oceans, many large animals vanished soon after. The book asks us to hold this gently but honestly. Long before factories and engines, humans were already a force that could unbalance ecosystems. It happened in quiet steps, a new hunter appears. The prey has never learned to fear that kind of coordination. Fires are set to clear brush and guide animals into easier paths. Over time, the big, slow-breeding creatures, giant marsupials, mammoths, enormous birds, cannot recover. Extinction is rarely a single loud event. It is often the gradual absence of return, the empty space where a hoofbeat used to be. And still, foragers were not farmers. They did not wake each day to the same field. Their diets could be surprisingly varied, and their social worlds often less rigid than later societies. There is debate in the details, but the gentle point remains. Progress is not a straight line from bad to good. It is a trade. Sapiens invites you to notice how easily the modern mind romanticizes the past or dismisses it. The truth is softer and more complicated. A forager can be hungry, cold, and frightened, and also free from certain kinds of chronic toil. A farmer can be surrounded by stored grain, and also pinned to one place by seasons, debts, and fences. So tonight, let this land like a slow breath. History is made of trade-offs, and trade-offs are made of needs. No era is pure. No era is only cruel. People do what they can with the tools they have and with the stories they believe. There is also a quieter point Sapiens returns to. Foragers often lived in worlds where information was wide and deep. To find food, you needed to understand plants, animals, weather, tracks, tides, and the shifting moods of the landscape. In that sense, knowledge was distributed, not concentrated. Everyone carried pieces of the map. As settlements grow later, knowledge becomes specialized and stored. Inside granaries, inside temples, inside the heads of scribes. That can be powerful. It can also make ordinary people dependent on systems they can't fully see. The trade is subtle. Complexity brings abundance, and abundance brings new vulnerabilities. Picture a shoreline at dusk. Footprints appear, then vanish as the tide returns. That is how many early lives were lightly held by the earth, then washed clean. And yet the patterns we set down, even briefly, can ripple outward for millennia. It's a quiet thought, and it doesn't need solving. It only needs noticing. And when you imagine those wandering bands, imagine their nights. Without electric light, darkness was thicker and stars were sharper. Sleep came earlier, sometimes in shorter pieces, waking to check the fire, then settling again. The next great shift is the one Sapiens calls the agricultural revolution. It can sound at first like a triumph. Humans learned to domesticate wheat and rice, to herd goats and sheep, to store food, to build villages. More calories per acre. More children survive. Populations grow. The human footprint widens. But the book asks you to look closer, as if you're leaning in to read fine script on an old page. Farming did not necessarily make individual lives easier. Many early farmers worked longer hours than foragers with narrower diets, more exposure to parasites, and greater vulnerability to drought and disease. When a community depends on a few crops, a bad season becomes a crisis. There is a gentle, unsettling metaphor here. Humans did not domesticate wheat so much as wheat domesticated humans. Fields demanded weeding, guarding, watering. People stayed near their plots. Homes became heavier. Property appeared. Boundaries mattered. And with boundaries came hierarchy. Some people owning more land, some people doing more labor, some people enforcing order. None of this is said to shame the past. It is simply the texture of change. When a society produces surplus, it can support specialists, builders, priests, soldiers, scribes. Surplus is possibility. It is also control. Grain can be taxed, counted, stored behind walls. A harvest can be measured, and so can a person. Farming also changes how humans relate to animals. A wolf becomes a dog, first a shadow near the fire, then a helper, then family. Goats and sheep become walking storage, turned into meat, milk, wool. Domestication is intimacy with an edge. It is care, and it is control, and it reshapes both species. Archaeology shows bones and teeth shifting as diets narrow, and skeletons bearing the marks of repetitive labor. It also shows communities building new kinds of meaning, shrines, burial sites, shared ceremonies that anchor a people to a place. When you stay, you remember differently. The land becomes layered with ancestors, and the future begins to feel like something you can plan. So let the image be gentle. A field under moonlight, rows like quiet lines in a book, a village sleeping, smoke lingering in the air. A child dreams while adults plan tomorrow's work. This is not better or worse. It is the moment the human story begins to gather weight, like ink soaking into parchment. With permanent settlements came new companions, mice in the grain, standing water, crowding, and the easy travel of infection. Childhood illnesses spread more readily. Hunger became less seasonal for some, but more catastrophic for others when stores failed. And because land could be owned, it could also be inherited. Sapiens also notes that as societies grow, roles can become fixed. Stories about what is natural, repeated until it feels like physics. At night, you can remember that these two are human patterns, shaped by power as well as biology. Once people settled, time began to feel different. Seasons mattered before, of course, but now a missed week could mean weeds, and weeds could mean hunger. The day filled with repetition. Hoe, carry, grind, mend, you can almost hear it. The steady scrape of stone on grain, the low murmur of animals in pens, the soft counting that begins when someone wants to know how much is enough. With agriculture came new kinds of problems and new kinds of solutions. Villages grew into towns. Towns needed coordination, water, storage, defense, paths that became roads. Writing emerged in several places, not first as poetry, but as accountant, marks that remember debts, inventories, and taxes. The earliest scripts are often lists, human memory extended onto clay and papyrus. Sapiens treats this as another kind of revolution, the rise of imagined orders that are written down and enforced. Laws, titles, ranks, borders, these are not rocks or rivers, but they can become as real as either when enough people believe and obey. A village can function on personal trust. A kingdom needs records. And here, the story becomes quietly familiar. Even now, much of your day is shaped by documents you did not write, IDs, contracts, schedules, passwords, regulations. These are modern versions of the same impulse to stabilize cooperation by making it legible. When you can measure something, you can manage it. When you can record something, you can demand it. This is also where inequality begins to harden. In small groups, status can remain fluid, negotiated day by day. In larger societies, it often becomes inherited. Castes, classes, titles, debts that pass from parent to child. Sapiens calls these hierarchies imagined orders, and the phrase is calming in a strange way because it reminds you that what was imagined can, at least in principle, be imagined differently. Still, people find softness inside systems. They fall in love, they sing, they cook, they care for elders. Even inside a rigid order, a human heart looks for warmth. So as you listen, feel the weight of your blanket, the steadiness of your breathing. Paperwork can be loud in daylight. At night, it fades. The older rhythms return, pulse, breath, darkness, and the quiet certainty that rest is a kind of wisdom. To run a city, rulers began to count people the way they counted grain. Censuses, property lines, calendars, standard weights and measures, tools for making a messy world readable. A field becomes a number. A person becomes a category. And once life is written down, decisions can be made from far away by someone who trusts the marks more than the faces. Picture a clay tablet drying in evening air, its symbols small and careful. Nearby, someone sleeps, unaware that those marks will steer tomorrow. Let your own thoughts become like that clay, easy to smooth. You do not need to keep every detail. You can let the mind empty gently and return to silence. As towns become cities and cities begin to lean into the shape of kingdoms, humans need a new kind of trust. Not the warm trust of a known face, but the cooler trust of a stranger who will still follow the same rules. You might trade with someone you've never met, and somehow both of you believe the exchange will hold. Sapiens says one of the most elegant tools for this is money. Not coins, not paper, not digital numbers, but the shared belief that a thing can represent value, and that value will be honored later by someone else. Money is a story that travels well. It crosses dialects. It crosses oceans. It persuades strangers to cooperate in ways that personal friendships cannot. Historically, money has taken many forms. Shells, beads, grain, silver, gold, minted coins stamped with a ruler's authority. Each form is different on the surface, but similar underneath. A promise made believable by collective agreement. Once a society trusts that promise, it can build markets that connect distant places. Wheat moving one direction, spices another. Ideas flowing quietly in both. Money also changes relationships. It allows specialization. One person makes shoes, Another grows food, another mends boats, another records laws. It allows large projects, canals, roads, ports, temples. It also allows debt, and debt can tether the future to the past. In the book's telling, this is one of the recurring patterns. When humans invent a system to gain freedom, they often also invent a new way to be bound. And yet, there is something soothing here, if you let it be. All day long, your world is made of invisible agreements, prices, wages, subscriptions, credit. Yet at night, you can step back and see it as a human invention, almost delicate, like a bridge of paper held up by belief. Sapiens points out that money is unusually tolerant. A religion may ask you to reject other gods. A tribe may distrust other tribes, but money is willing to meet anyone. It asks only, do we agree on the value? That tolerance makes it powerful and sometimes unsettling because it can flatten differences into a single scale. So, imagine a market at dusk. The air is cooling. Vendors pack away baskets. A few coins clink softly in a pouch. Under the practical noise, there is a deeper quiet. Strangers have cooperated without knowing each other's names. The day's small agreements held. Let your own thoughts loosen in the same way. You don't need to solve anything tonight. Just notice the strange beauty of it, a shared fiction that becomes a shared reality, and a shared reality that shapes millions of lives, all from the simple human ability to say, this stands for something, and to agree. In time, this trust expands into credit, a gentle faith in tomorrow. People borrow because they believe the future can carry repayment. That belief can build and it can mislead. Tonight, it can simply be noticed and then released. Alongside money, another force scales human cooperation: religion. Sapiens uses the word broadly, not only as gods and temples, but as any system of shared values and rules that claims a higher authority than individual preference. A religion in this sense is a story about how the world ought to be and why. In early societies, spirits lived in rivers and forests, and rituals helped people feel less alone in a vast, unpredictable landscape. Later, as communities grew, religions often became more universal, offering rules that could unify large populations and moral frameworks that could make strangers feel connected. If two people believe the same sacred story, they can cooperate with a confidence that feels deeper than mere convenience. The book also points to a quiet shift, the move from local spirits to big moral orders. When a society expands, it needs stories big enough to hold many kinds of people. Universal religions like Buddhism, Christianity, Islam offer a sense that there is one world, one truth, one path. That can be a comfort. It can also be a source of conflict when truths compete. And then there are the modern religions, the ones that don't always call themselves that. Ideologies. Nationalism, capitalism, communism, liberal humanism. Each offers a set of values and assumptions about what matters most. Each asks for faith in something unseen, the nation as a shared identity, the market as a guiding logic, the individual as sacred. Sapiens makes another gentle observation. These belief systems don't only live in books. They live in habits, ceremonies, architecture, and education. They're repeated until they feel like common sense. They can help people care for one another, and they can justify cruelty depending on how they're used. Tonight, let this land softly. In your own life, you follow invisible scripts more than you realize. Ideas about success, fairness, love, meaning. They can help you move through the day. They can also make you tense when you feel you're falling behind. Seen from far enough away, these scripts are part of the same ancient pattern. Humans seeking order inside uncertainty. So picture a candlelit room, pages laid open, ink drying slowly. Someone reads, someone listens. Outside, the world is dark. Inside, a shared story gathers people into the same emotional weather. That is the quiet power of belief. It can steady the mind, and it can steer a civilization. As you breathe, let your body keep what it needs: warmth, safety, rest. Let the rest of the world's loud convictions soften into the background like distant bells you no longer have to answer. And notice how belief is often carried by the senses. A melody sung together, the smell of incense or bread, the shared silence of a crowd. These rituals train the body to feel belonging, and when the body feels belonging, cooperation becomes effortless, almost sleepy. Now, the story widens into empires, those sprawling, patient machines of administration, language, roads, taxes, and soldiers. Sapiens doesn't treat empires as purely villain or purely hero. It asks you to see them as engines that spread ideas, unify systems, and reshape cultures, often through violence, often through negotiation, always through power. An empire, in the book's framing, is more than conquest. It is also standardization, a common currency, a common legal code, a common language used for trade and bureaucracy. Empires can connect distant peoples who otherwise might never interact, and in doing so, they create hybrid cultures, foods, words, customs mixed together over centuries. You can still taste those mixtures today. Yet empire can also flatten. It can erase local stories, replace local gods with imperial ones, and demand loyalty through fear. This is another Sapiens theme. The same structure can create peace in one place and suffering in another. A road can carry grain and travelers, and it can carry armies. A tax can fund aqueducts, and it can fund oppression. The book invites a calm, long view. Empires rise and fall like tides. They look permanent while you're inside them, and then, centuries later, they are names on maps and stones half buried in grass. That perspective can be strangely soothing. It doesn't erase pain. It simply reminds you that nothing human-made is as solid as it seems at noon. Sapiens also notes that empires often believe they are bringing civilization, and sometimes they genuinely do bring literacy, shared laws, and wider markets. But the price is often the loss of local autonomy and the deep injury of conquest. History here is layered like sediment at the bottom of a river. Every generation deposits something, a rule, a song, a scar. So imagine walking through a sleeping city, streets narrow, lamps low, a distant guard's footsteps fading. The empire's paperwork is somewhere in a building you'll never enter, filed in neat stacks. But above it all, the sky is indifferent and serene. Stars don't recognize borders. Tonight, you don't have to carry the weight of civilization. Let the grand structures pass through your mind like clouds. You are here in a smaller truth. Breath in, breath out. The quiet comfort of being held by night. Empires also leave behind the habit of imagining the world as one connected space. They draw maps, build roads, enforce common measures. They make travel easier and control easier too. A net that connects and a net that catches. And in the middle of it all are ordinary lives. A farmer learning a new language to deal with officials. A child hearing blended stories, half ancestral, half imperial, until the blend feels like home. So imagine an old road stretching outward. It is quiet now. Light touches its stones. The rulers are gone, but the road remains. Your mind can walk it and then step off it and return to rest. As empires spread and religions travel, the book lingers on a surprising claim. Much of human order is imagined. Not imaginary in the sense of fake, but imagined in the sense of collectively created. Laws, corporations, nations, these are not like mountains. They exist because many minds agree to treat them as real and then behave accordingly. A corporation, for example, is a legal fiction, an entity that can own property, borrow money, and be sued even though it has no body. A nation is a shared identity, supported by flags, myths, ceremonies, and borders. Even human rights in Sapiens are described as a powerful moral story, one that many people embrace deeply, yet one that lives in the realm of belief, not in the realm of physics. This can feel unsettling, but it can also be strangely freeing. If so much of the world is made of shared stories, then stories matter. They shape what people build, what they protect, what they fear. And at the personal level, this is true too. The story you tell yourself about your life, your worth, your future, your place, changes how your days feel in your body. Sapiens suggests that imagined orders become stable through education, repetition, and institutions. Children learn the rules as if they were natural. Adults enforce them as if they were inevitable. Because they are shared, they become difficult to question. Yet history shows that imagined orders can change, slowly, unevenly, sometimes painfully, but they can change. The book also touches on a quiet tension. Many systems depend on inequality. If everyone is equal, who cleans the streets? Who fights wars? Who builds palaces? Societies create stories to make hierarchy feel right. These stories can be religious, scientific, or cultural, and they often sound calm and reasonable while doing something harsh. Tonight, you don't need to argue with the world. Just notice it. Picture a classroom at dawn, chalk on a board, children repeating what everyone knows. Now picture a later century where everyone knows something different. It's the same human brain, the same hunger for belonging, but the story has shifted. So let your own inner story soften at the edges. You are allowed to be more than your job title, more than your productivity, more than your performance. The world will keep spinning without your constant effort to hold it together. In the dark, the mind returns to simpler truths: warmth, safety, the slow certainty that sleep is not an achievement, but a return. Sapiens invites a soft question. If our lives are shaped by shared stories, what happens when a story stops serving well-being? Sometimes people rewrite it. Sometimes they cling to it. Either way, you can feel the difference in the body. A story of scarcity tightens. A story of belonging loosens. So take a breath and let tight stories fall away tonight. Let the labels drift. The fact you are here listening and you can rest. And then, in Sapiens, we arrive at the scientific revolution, one of the most important turns in the book, and one of the quietest in spirit. It begins not with a new machine, but with a new attitude, the willingness to admit ignorance. For many societies, knowledge was anchored in ancient authority, sacred texts, inherited traditions, the wisdom of elders. Science begins when people say, calmly, "We might be wrong." From that small phrase, a vast cascade follows. Observation, measurement, experiments repeated, telescopes turning the sky into data, microscopes revealing hidden worlds, maps becoming more accurate, medicine improving slowly at first, then faster. The world becomes less mysterious in some ways and more mysterious in others, because each answer opens new questions. Sapiens ties this revolution to empire and capitalism. Exploration needed funding. Funding expected returns. Knowledge became power, and power became profit, and profit funded more exploration. Ships sailed farther, not only for wonder, but for spices, silver, and strategic advantage. Many journeys were heroic in effort and brutal in consequence, and the book asks you to hold both truths without flinching. Another key idea is the rise of credit. Modern economies grow because people believe the future can be richer than the present. Banks lend, entrepreneurs build, governments borrow, and everyone hopes tomorrow's production will repay today's promises. This faith can lift millions out of poverty. It can also create bubbles and crashes when imagination outruns reality. There is a gentle irony here. Science thrives on uncertainty, yet modern life often demands certainty. We want forecasts, guarantees, clean answers. The scientific mind, at its best, remains humble, confident enough to test, cautious enough to doubt. Tonight, let the humility soothe you. You don't have to know everything. You don't have to resolve the future before sleeping. The mind can rest inside, not yet. The body can soften when it stops trying to predict every outcome. Imagine a ship crossing a dark ocean guided by stars and simple instruments. The crew doesn't know what lies ahead. They carry questions like lanterns, and on the other side of the sea, a new map begins. Let that be enough. Gentle curiosity, and the peace of letting sleep arrive when it's ready. Sapiens also notes that science is a habit. To separate what we wish were true from what evidence can support. That habit changes daily life. Maps reshape trade, sanitation reshapes cities. Later medicines reshape how long people live. Progress becomes a modern story of its own. You can feel how this story speeds the world up. More light at night, more travel. With speed comes restlessness. Tonight, you can step out of that race. Imagine a quiet laboratory after hours, glassware still, notes on a table, rain on a window. The questions can wait. You are allowed to be unfinished and safe. With the scientific revolution, the pace of change begins to quicken. And then, almost without warning, it starts to feel like a sprint. Sapiens describes a world where curiosity turns into industry, and industry turns into a new kind of everyday life. Machines that multiply muscle, factories that multiply output, and energy sources that let cities glow long after sunset. For most of history, humans lived on a tight energy budget. Muscle, wood, wind, water. Then coal and later oil arrived like buried sunlight, released in a concentrated rush. Steam engines turn heat into motion. Trains stitch continents together. Ships cross oceans on schedules instead of seasons. The cost of distance collapses, and with it, the shape of the possible. The book asks you to notice how quickly normal changes. A child who grows up with streetlights cannot imagine the older darkness. A family who eats sugar daily forgets it was once rare. A person who can cross a country in hours forgets that travel used to be a life chapter. Progress is real, but it is also a kind of amnesia. Each new comfort quietly erases the memory of living without it. And as machines spread, so does a new logic of time. Clocks become rulers. Work becomes measured in hours, not in tasks finished when the weather allows. People leave fields and move into cities, and the city begins to train the mind to move faster. Noise, crowds, schedules, deadlines, constant comparison. Tonight, you don't have to live inside that speed. You can step outside it for a while. Let the world's engines run somewhere far away, and let your room return to older rhythms. Breath, heartbeat, the quiet, sinking feeling of safety. Sapiens also ties this acceleration to a deeper story, the partnership between science and capitalism. Research needs funding. Funding looks for returns. So knowledge becomes an investment, and inventions become assets. A society begins to organize itself around growth, not just survival, but expansion. This growth can be astonishingly productive. It brings sanitation, vaccines, improved agriculture, mass education, and longer lifespans. It also brings new vulnerabilities: pollution, climate shifts, weapons of unprecedented scale, and a psychological pressure to keep up with a world that never stops updating itself. So imagine gently a factory at night. The machines are finally quiet. Dust settles. A single lamp glows over a workbench. In the stillness, you can sense something the day hides. Even the loudest systems depend on silence in between. Even progress needs pauses, and you are allowed to be one of those pauses. Let your thoughts slow like cooling metal. Let the mind soften its grip on tomorrow. Tonight, the only productive thing you need to do is rest. As industry grows, Sapiens turns toward a modern myth that becomes almost as powerful as any ancient religion: the faith in continuous growth. Not growth as a pleasant bonus, but growth as a requirement, an assumption that the future must be larger than the present, and that more is the direction we should travel. This belief reshapes daily life. Companies are expected to expand, not simply endure. Governments build policies around rising production. Individuals are encouraged to develop, upgrade, optimize. Even childhood begins to carry the idea of future returns: education as investment, skills as capital, networking as infrastructure. The book also points to a subtle engine beneath growth: consumerism. Modern economies depend on people wanting new things, often before they truly need them. Advertising becomes a kind of storytelling profession, training desire the way older cultures trained devotion. You are incomplete without this. You are behind without that. It's not only products, but identities that get sold. The person you could become if you just buy the next step. And yet, consumerism isn't only manipulation. It also rides on genuine improvements: safer homes, better medicine, easier communication, richer choices. The trouble is the restless edge, the way desire can be taught to renew itself endlessly, like a tap that never fully turns off. Sapiens suggests that modern life often confuses comfort with meaning. Comfort is valuable. Meaning is different. Meaning is the quiet sense that your life fits, that it belongs to something larger than the next purchase or the next achievement. Tonight, feel how different your body is when it stops reaching, when you don't need to become anything for a few minutes, when you let enough be a warm word instead of a distant goal. The book links this to another modern creation: credit. Credit is faith in the future, faith that tomorrow's work can repay today's borrowing. Credit can build cities, fund inventions, lift millions into higher living standards, but it can also bind people to a future they haven't lived yet, making life feel like a permanent appointment. So many of our daily tensions come from imagined futures: bills, expectations, performance, the fear of falling behind. The mind runs ahead, and the body follows with tight shoulders and shallow breath. In this story, we practice a gentler skill: staying where you are. The future can wait outside the door like a polite guest. You don't have to invite it in tonight. Picture a shop window after closing, lights dimmed, mannequins still. The promises of the day are quiet now. There is nothing to choose, nothing to compare, only darkness and rest, and the simple relief of not needing to want anything at all. Let your breathing deepen. Let the wanting mind grow drowsy. Let enough settle over you like a blanket. At a certain point, Sapiens asks a question that lands softly but stays. With all this progress, more food, more medicine, more safety, more comfort, are humans actually happier? It's a delicate question because it touches the private heart of the story, not just the public facts. The book suggests that happiness isn't guaranteed by power. Our feelings are shaped by biology, chemistry that evolved for survival, not for constant contentment. Pleasure systems push us to seek, to strive, to bond, to improve our chances. They reward us, then fade, then push again. This is useful for evolution. It can be exhausting for a modern mind living in a world of endless options. Sapiens also points out that happiness is deeply comparative. A person can have far more than their ancestors and still feel deprived if their neighbors have more. Status, recognition, belonging. These are old human needs that don't disappear when wealth rises. Sometimes they intensify because the ladder gets taller. There's also the puzzle of expectations. When life improves, expectations often rise with it. What once felt miraculous becomes basic. A warm shower, a fridge, a quick reply, a quiet room. Comforts become rights in the mind, and when they wobble, the nervous system reacts as if something essential is breaking. Tonight, notice how gentle it is to lower expectations for a moment. You don't need a perfect life to sleep. You only need a safe enough room, a steady enough breath, and the permission to stop evaluating yourself. The book explores how religions and philosophies have long tried to address happiness, not by promising constant pleasure, but by shaping desire. Some traditions teach gratitude, some teach detachment, some teach duty. Modern culture often teaches achievement and self-expression. Each approach creates a different emotional climate. Sapiens doesn't insist on one answer. Instead, it invites awareness. If your mood is partly chemistry, partly story, partly comparison, then you can relate to it with more tenderness. You don't have to treat every feeling as a verdict. Imagine happiness not as a destination, but as a weather pattern. It comes and goes. You can open a window to it when it arrives, and you can still rest when it passes. The book also raises a quiet concern. Modern life can be more comfortable, yet less communal. Foragers lived in tight bands. Villages had dense webs of shared labor. Some modern lives are efficient but lonely, and loneliness for a social species is not a small thing. It changes sleep, appetite, immune function, the whole inner landscape. So tonight, let this story keep you company. Let it be a gentle voice in the dark, a reminder that you are part of a long human line, filled with the same needs: to belong, to be safe, to be seen, to rest. Feel your body sink a little deeper. You don't have to solve happiness. You can simply allow peace to visit, briefly, like a quiet animal that trusts the room. As the modern era unfolds, Sapiens turns to what it calls humanism, a family of beliefs that place human feelings, choices, and experiences at the center of meaning. In earlier centuries, meaning often came from gods, traditions, or cosmic order. Humanism says, look inward. Your inner voice matters. Your happiness matters. Your freedom matters. This idea becomes woven into art, politics, education, and economics. Democracies ask citizens to vote according to preferences. Markets ask consumers to choose according to desire. Romantic culture tells you to follow your heart. Even self-help, in its many forms, is a humanist project. The belief that a better life can be designed by understanding the self. Sapiens suggests that this shift is profound because it quietly replaces old authorities with a new one. The individual, the customer is always right. Be true to yourself. Listen to your feelings. These can be liberating. They can also be confusing because feelings are changeable and the self is not a simple object. The book offers a gentle paradox. Humanism tells you to trust your inner experience, yet modern science reveals that inner experience is partly constructed by neurons, hormones, and cultural stories. Your self is real in the sense that it is lived, but it is also assembled moment by moment, like a story your brain tells to keep your life coherent. Tonight, that can be soothing rather than alarming. If the self is a story, then you can loosen it a little. You can set down the role you perform in daylight, professional, partner, parent, friend, and simply be a breathing body in a dark room. Sapiens also points out that humanism has branches. Liberal humanism celebrates freedom and individual rights. Social humanism emphasizes equality and shared welfare. Evolutionary and nationalist forms can treat competition as natural and justify hierarchy. The same central idea, human experience matters, can lead to very different societies depending on how it is interpreted. In a way, we are always living inside a belief system, whether we name it or not. We are always being taught what to value: productivity, kindness, status, creativity, security, adventure, love. These values become the lenses through which we feel our own lives. So let this be a soft exercise. For the next few minutes, remove the lenses. Don't judge your day. Don't grade your future. Let yourself be unlabeled. Let the mind become a simple room, lightly lit, with nothing to arrange. Picture a museum after closing, halls quiet, portraits watching in the dark. Human history hangs on walls, but no one is interpreting it tonight. The artifacts are still. The guards are bored. Outside, the city hums. Inside, time slows. Humanism, at its best, can also be tenderness. The belief that suffering matters, that compassion is not optional. Tonight, you can borrow that tenderness for yourself. Whatever your mind has been carrying, you can set it down without explanation. Near the end of Sapiens, the story leans toward the horizon, where history becomes something like speculation, yet still rooted in real trends. If earlier revolutions were cognitive, agricultural, and scientific, the next may be biological and technological. Humans are learning to redesign life, including their own bodies and minds. The book points to biotechnology, genetic engineering, and the merging of humans with machines as possible paths. We already see early versions: medicines that alter mood, implants that restore hearing, devices that extend memory, algorithms that shape choices. The boundary between natural and designed grows softer each decade. Sapiens asks, if Homo sapiens can upgrade itself, what happens to the story of equality and shared humanity? If some people can afford enhancements and others cannot, do new castes form, this time written into biology? And if machines become better at more tasks, what becomes of work, purpose, dignity? These are large questions, and tonight we hold them gently. We don't need to solve the future to understand the present. The point is simpler. Humans are gaining power faster than they are gaining wisdom. Power over ecosystems, power over economies, power over attention, power over the building blocks of life. The book also returns to the theme of happiness. If feelings are partly chemistry and chemistry can be altered, then future societies might pursue pleasure and calm directly, engineering moods the way we engineer crops. That could reduce suffering. It could also change what it means to live an authentic life, if authentic becomes something you can dial. And underneath all of this is a quieter question. Do we know what we want? Not what we desire in the moment, but what we truly want as a species. Survival, comfort, meaning, beauty, connection. The book suggests we have been very good at gaining capabilities and less good at choosing the direction. Tonight, you can feel how different your own wanting becomes when the lights are off. In daylight, the mind wants results. At night, the body wants peace. At night, the most ancient goal returns: safety, warmth, rest. Imagine a future city seen from far above, lights like constellations, roads like veins, homes like small glowing cells. Inside one room, someone sleeps. Inside another, someone worries. Inside another, someone laughs quietly. No matter how advanced the systems become, each life is still lived one breath at a time. So, if this story leaves you with questions, let them be like stones in a riverbed, present but not heavy. The current can flow around them. You don't have to carry them to sleep. For now, all you need is the softness beneath you, the steady air entering and leaving, and the calm truth that you belong to a long human story. And tonight, the story can fade into darkness, and you can rest. By the time the modern world settles into its familiar shape, the map is crowded with nation-states, markets, factories, and schools that teach the same basic skills to millions of children. Sapiens describes this as a kind of global convergence, Different cultures keep their flavors, but the underlying operating system becomes increasingly shared. One sign of that shared system is bureaucracy. Forms, offices, databases, passports, permits, small rituals of paper and authority that let large societies function. Bureaucracy can feel cold, but it is also a way of making strangers predictable. When the rules are written down, cooperation can stretch across cities and oceans without collapsing into suspicion. Another sign is standard time. Clocks once followed local sun, but railways, telegraphs, and global trade pushed societies toward timetables, time zones, and synchronized schedules. Minutes became measurable, then billable. The day was sliced into units that could be bought and sold, and many lives began to feel like they were lived inside a calendar. Then there is the global economy. A product can be designed in one country, assembled in another, financed in a third, and bought in a fourth. Shipping containers, standardized ports, and digital payments make distance feel thin. Sapiens notes that this connectivity brings efficiency and abundance, but it also ties distant lives together in fragile ways. A shock in one place can ripple everywhere, like a tremor traveling through a web. And there is the rise of the nation, which asks people to feel loyalty to millions of strangers they will never meet. Flags, anthems, holidays, monuments, symbols that turn a huge population into a single we. The nation can inspire public goods and solidarity. It can also demand sacrifice, sometimes with frightening ease, when fear arrives and leaders point to enemies. If you feel a little tired just hearing this, that's understandable. Modern life asks the mind to hold many invisible structures at once. At night, you can let them go. You can remember that beneath citizenship and credentials and job titles, you are still an animal that breathes, sleeps, heals, and wakes. Sapiens offers a quiet lens. Most of what we treat as solid is actually a coordinated performance. It works because we keep showing up and agreeing. That means it can change, and it also means you are allowed to step out of it for a few hours without guilt. So imagine the world as seen from above, not as borders, but as light. Cities glitter like clusters of fireflies. Roads trace soft lines across darkness. Somewhere inside that glow, a single room is calm. You are here. The world can keep its complexity. You can keep your rest. The world slows, and so do we, as if the whole planet exhales. Sapiens then returns to a theme that has been humming underneath the whole story. Humans reshape the planet, often without meaning to, simply by living inside their own inventions. The cognitive revolution let us coordinate. The agricultural revolution anchored us. The scientific revolution amplified us. And now the results are written into soil, water, and air. In the modern era, humans become an ecological force on the scale of ice ages and volcanic shifts. Forests turn into farms, wetlands become cities, rivers are redirected, and oceans are fished with industrial efficiency. The book doesn't linger in panic, but it asks for clarity. Power without restraint has consequences even when those consequences arrive slowly. One consequence is biodiversity loss, the quiet thinning of life. Another is climate change, the gradual warming of a system that used to feel unchangeable. There are also subtler shifts, fertilizers altering the nitrogen cycle, plastics drifting into food chains, light pollution washing out the stars for many children who have never seen a truly dark sky. These are not just environmental facts. They are stories about connection. One species can touch everything because everything is connected. A choice made in a boardroom can change a forest. A choice made in a kitchen can change demand across continents. Sapiens invites you to see the world as a single, living network. And yet, the same species that causes harm can also notice it. We can measure carbon in the air, track species decline, restore habitats, and choose different energy systems. The future is not predetermined, but it is influenced by the stories we decide to live by. Stories of extraction or stories of stewardship. Tonight, rather than fear, let the scale bring humility. Picture Earth at night, clouds drifting, oceans dark and endless, continents quiet. From that distance, human conflict looks small, and human responsibility looks real. We are powerful, yes, but we are also brief. Sapiens suggests that moral progress is possible, but fragile. Slavery becomes less acceptable in many places. Violence, in some measures, declines over centuries. Rights expand unevenly. None of this is guaranteed. It depends on institutions, education, and the shared belief that other minds matter. So let your own mind practice that belief gently. The way you treat yourself is part of the same moral fabric. If you can offer yourself a little softness tonight, you are strengthening the human capacity for care in the smallest, most intimate way. Listen for the quiet sounds around you. Let them remind you that the world is still here, still breathing, and you can breathe with it, slowly, steadily, without trying to carry the whole planet on your shoulders. As the story nears its present-day edge, Sapiens asks you to notice how quickly human beings have become both the makers and the made. We shape our systems, and then our systems shape us. They shape our attention, our habits, our sense of time, and even what we think a normal life should feel like. Consider attention. For most of history, the mind was claimed by immediate surroundings. Weather, people nearby, the search for food, the safety of the group. Today, attention is harvested and traded. Screens invite the brain into endless novelty, and algorithms learn what keeps you looking. The ancient reward systems in the brain, curiosity, social comparison, fear of missing out, are gently pulled like strings. Information itself becomes an environment. News arrives without waiting. Messages stack up. The world feels close, and because it feels close, the nervous system can behave as if every distant crisis is happening in the room. Sapiens would call this another kind of imagined order, a shared reality made of symbols, numbers, images, and constant updates. The book doesn't need to mention every modern device for the lens to fit. New technologies often arrive faster than our wisdom about how to live with them. We gain tools, and then we adapt our lives around the tools, sometimes without choosing, and sometimes without noticing the cost. And yet, you are choosing right now. You are choosing dimness over brightness, a slow voice over a fast feed, a long view over the daily spike. This is a kind of quiet resistance, not angry, not dramatic, just human. It's the choice to let the mind be a forest again, not a marketplace. Sapiens also returns to meaning. If older ages found meaning in gods and modernity found meaning in progress and individual freedom, what comes next? It's possible that the next century will offer many competing answers. Some will be beautiful, some will be hollow. The ability to question our own stories may be the most important skill we have. So tonight, let the questioning be soft. You don't have to decide what life is for before you sleep. You can let the question float like a lantern on dark water. Your body already knows what it is for in this moment, to rest, to repair, to return you gently to yourself. Imagine a library late at night. The books are still. The arguments are quiet. No one is demanding that you finish a chapter. The knowledge can wait on the shelf. Your mind can become a blank page, clean and kind. And as your breathing steadies, notice how little you truly need to be safe right now. A place to lie down, a little warmth, a sense that the night is holding the edges. Let everything else, metrics, messages, plans, fade into the background like ink dissolving into water. In its final movements, Sapiens leaves you with a calm, unsettling possibility. Homo sapiens may not remain the central character of the story for much longer. Not because we vanish overnight, but because we may transform ourselves into something new or build systems that outgrow us. The book points to two pathways. One is biological engineering, editing genes, redesigning bodies, extending lifespans, altering traits that used to be left to chance. The other is intelligent technology, machines that perform more tasks, make more decisions, and perhaps one day rival human cognition in domains we once thought were uniquely ours. It also introduces a modern faith it calls dataism, the idea that the highest value is the flow of information and that the best decisions are those made by data processing systems. In that worldview, your feelings are data, your choices are data, your body is a set of signals. Life becomes something to optimize. If these trends continue, many old questions return in new clothing. Who owns the tools that shape life? Who benefits from enhancement? Who is left behind? What does equality mean when abilities can be purchased and when algorithms can predict or influence choices? And what becomes of responsibility when decisions are outsourced to systems that no one person fully understands? These are big questions, and they can feel sharp in daylight. Tonight, we soften them. We remember that the future is not a single doorway. It is a hallway with many turns. It is shaped by laws, ethics, culture, and the quiet choices of millions of people. What they reward, what they refuse, what they normalize. Sapiens also circles back to happiness. If joy and suffering are partly chemical, future societies might be tempted to engineer mood directly. That could relieve pain. It could also blur the difference between a meaningful life and a managed one. In a world where you can dial a feeling, what becomes of growth, of resilience, of love that is earned through time? Even this uncertainty can be held gently. The point is not to fear tomorrow. The point is to notice how rare it is in the history of life for a species to ask such questions at all. We are the kind of animal that wonders about itself. So take that wondering and let it become calm. Let it become a quiet respect for the strange, brief gift of consciousness. You are here, awake enough to listen and safe enough to rest. Imagine dawn arriving on a future city. Lights dim, birds begin again. People wake, carrying their stories into the day. And somewhere, someone will choose wisely, not loudly, but steadily, building a world that is kinder than it could have been. For now, you don't have to build anything. You only have to let sleep come closer, step by step, like soft footsteps in a hallway. And so we return to the simplest frame, a single human being resting, while the whole long story continues around them. Sapiens spans tens of thousands of years, yet it keeps circling one quiet truth. Reality for any creature is lived moment by moment. Empires, markets, ideologies, revolutions, they are real in their impact, but they are not the same as the feeling of air entering your lungs. Tonight, you have walked through the cognitive revolution, where shared imagination lets strangers cooperate. You have passed the agricultural revolution, where fields and fences anchored people to place and surplus. You have drifted through empires, religions, and money, those shared fictions that coordinate enormous societies. And you have touched the scientific revolution, where admitting we don't know unlocked a new kind of power. You have also felt the modern surge. Industry and energy, global trade and bureaucracy, the reshaping of the planet, and the approaching horizon of biotechnology and intelligent machines. If anything in that arc feels heavy, let the scale lighten it. Most of what seemed permanent in one century became ordinary or vanished in the next. Sapiens can be read as celebration or warning, but in this quiet retelling, it is also an invitation to humility. We are not outside nature. We are inside it, made of it. Our cleverness is real. Our responsibility is real. And our fragility is real too. So let your mind stop reaching for conclusions. The book ends with questions because the future is not finished. Tonight, your own future can be as simple as the next hour of sleep, the next deep breath, the next softening of the jaw, the unclenching of the shoulders, If you notice any lingering tension, imagine it as something physical you can place down. A stone in the hand, warmed by the day, now set gently on the ground. Let the hand relax. Let the shoulder relax. Let the face become neutral, as if it belongs to someone already asleep. Picture an ancient manuscript again, ink fading at the edges, pages worn smooth by hands that came before yours. Each generation added a line. Each generation fell asleep at the end of its day. The human story is written by waking and resting, over and over like waves. And as you lie here, you don't need to understand everything to belong to it. You belong because you are here, alive in the same way millions have been alive before, listening for safety, seeking warmth, settling into darkness. Let the room be quiet. Let the thoughts thin out like mist. Let the story dissolve into the steady hush of night. The world slows, and so do we. And in that slowing, sleep finds you. You are safe, you are held, and nothing else is required of you tonight. Good night.